Hello, everyone. Welcome to Snapshots Live, our new webinar series at San Francisco Public Works. My name is Coma Te, Public Information Officer with Construction Outreach and Public Affairs. We're excited to have all of you join us today, where we will learn more about Phase 2 of the Jefferson Streetscape project, where streetscape enhancements and a new plaza being installed along Jefferson Street will make one of San Francisco's most iconic commercial corridors safer and more welcoming than ever. We hope you will continue to join us every third Thursday of the month for this new virtual initiative, where we will hear from our colleagues and our city partners about the projects and programs we are leading. Please note, this Snapshots Live session is being recorded and will be available to watch again or share at a later time. Today's presentation will last about 45 minutes, including time for questions and answers. If there's anything you would like to ask our panelists about today's topic, please send over your questions through the Q&A feature by clicking on the Q&A icon found at the bottom of your screen. Our panelists today are Randall Scott, Executive Director of the Fisherman's Wharf Community Benefit District, Denny Phan, Project Manager, Tony Esterbrooks and Julie An with Landscape Architecture, and Ben Volberding, our Project Resident Engineer. Again, please be sure to stick around after we hear from our panelists today for our question and answer segment. For those joining us today who have dialed in via phone only, you may raise your hand to alert the host that you would like to ask a question during our Q&A segment by pressing *9. Let's get started with a little background about Jefferson Street as we hand it over to our first presenter, Executive Director of the Fisherman's Wharf CBD, Randall Scott.
Thank you very much, Coma. I appreciate that. So once again, my name is Randall Scott. I'm the Executive Director for the Fisherman's Wharf Community Benefit District, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about our area, so a little bit of the history behind it. So what you're looking at here is, this is the image of the wharf in 1891. And this was important for me to show it to you because it's a reminder that Fisherman's Wharf is not just a name. It's got a long storied history as part of our great city. So over time, there was a desire to be able to eat fresh catches of fish and Dungeness crab. And so with the rich Italian heritage and, love of food, they started what is now, the crab stands along Taylor Street. And so all that was born around the 1900s and continued for years and years. So that's the immediate short history of the Fisherman's Wharf. Now, you fast forward to 1978, that's when the Simmons family opened Pier 39 as an attraction and destination, which started, really doing its job and bringing more and more people down to the waterfront. And you've coupled that with, the Ghirardelli Chocolate Factory, and it just became a fantastic place to, hang out, enjoy the outdoors. Aquatic Park is right adjacent to it. So, it became very, very popular. It became so popular, it grew to the point where it kind of overwhelmed itself. So if you want to show the next slide, you can get an idea of what it looks like during the holidays. But as you can see, it's now bustling. Boudin has its headquarters there. There's a tremendous amount of activity and pedestrian activity, and it's a key component piece of the city because so many people see it as the city. It's an international icon. So the problem, again, we were a victim of our own success. There were so many people coming down and so many cars, and it just wasn't working. And so it was labeled a tourist trap, and it's not really a tourist trap. It just became untenable to walk around down there. We moved into an area where we wanted to start counting pedestrians. And so we put in pedestrian counters years ago. And if you take a look at this next slide, you'll see there's 60,000 people on a day. And these days are in October. During the summer times, we can see upwards of 100,000 people. And if you've ever walked along an 8-foot sidewalk with 100,000 people up and down every day, it's not functional. And again, we became victims of our own success. We had so many people coming down and wanted to see the wharf and enjoy the outdoors that it became it became unsafe. People were walking in the streets. We had cars in the streets. there was no flow to the overall area because there was never any plan. It just kind of happened. It blossomed into that. So in around 2010, the city realized a better job could be done. And partnering with the Fisherman's Wharf CBD and the city and, a number of other entities, the port and Public Works, we developed, co-developed, I guess you could say, the vision study of what Jefferson could be. And that was the impetus behind this absolutely fantastic project. I can say that now that we're almost done. And that is what Jefferson Street should be, now is. And that's thanks to Public Works and everybody there. And I'm not going to get into the weeds, so to speak. That's not, my job. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Denny. And so he can start off and do a much better job on exactly how this stuff is created. So thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you, Randall. Hi, everyone. My name is Denny Phan, and I'm the project manager from Public Works Infrastructure Design and Construction. And I'm really excited to be here to introduce the Jefferson Streetscape Phase 2 project, which is an exciting project located right in the heart of Fisherman's Wharf. And it is one of the city's busiest and most iconic tourist areas. As you can see from this map, the project limits are highlighted by the red line right there and spans 3 blocks from Jones Street to Powell Street. And there are many points of interest directly within and around the project limits. You have, Pier 39 just to the east. You have Aquatic Park in Gary Lake Square to the west, the tour fleets on the north, and a bunch of hotels just south of the project limits, which brings in a lot of pedestrian foot traffic. And along Jefferson Street itself, we have the famous Fisherman's Wharf sign right smack in the middle of the project limits, and many important businesses and shops, both small and large, such as Boudin's Bakery, which is famous for their clam chowder and sourdough bread, and the Wax Museum, and all the sports fishing fleets right there along the inner harbor, as well as the popular Wharf seafood restaurants. So with all that's going on in this neighborhood, Jefferson Street, rightfully serves as the main street of Fisherman's Wharf. And because of this, it's obvious that the neighborhood deeply cares about how the city went about designing and constructing this project, because in the end, it could significantly impact the commercial success of the area, which is even more important now that we're in a pandemic. And as Randall mentioned, in 2006, the Fisherman's Wharf CBD developed a vision document that detailed how they wanted to see the neighborhood grow in the future. And at the request of Supervisor Peskin, the planning department built upon this document and developed the Fisherman's Public Realm Plan, which formalized the community's vision and helped it turn into reality. And the community's overall vision was really to make the wharf a favorite destination for everyone by improving pedestrian experience, revitalizing the open spaces, and making a better connection to the surrounding neighborhood. And one of the most important goals of that plan was to develop new street designs for all the streets around the wharf to prioritize pedestrian safety and improve the experience at the wharf. And as the main street of the neighborhood, a redesigned Jefferson Street would play a central role in reinvigorating the Fisherman's Wharf and achieving that vision that the CBD had in the beginning. And that was a major focus of the plan. So in the end, the plan developed an overall concept plan for Jefferson Street. The original project actually spanned 5 blocks from Hyde Street to Powell Street. However, due to funding and construction constraints, the project was actually split into 2 phases. So phase 1 there, shown on the left, between Hyde and Jones Street, was completed in 2013. And it was fast tracked for the just in time for San Francisco to host America's Cup. And phase 1 was extremely well received and has helped really revitalize the business and the stretch of the street. And then we have the second project, which is phase 2, which is the topic of this webinar. And that goes from Jones Street to Powell Street. And this phase was split from phase 1 because of funding shortfalls, but also because of the added complexities of the Muni historic streetcar that runs right down this segment of the street, and the presence of the all-important seawall that's right under the sidewalk in our project limits. And our landscape architecture team will get into a little bit more detail on the design in a little bit, but at a high level, the project is reconstructing 3 blocks of roadway with geometrically patterned concrete panels to try to help slow traffic and make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists. We're also widening the sidewalks and reconstructing the Taylor Street Plaza where the famous sign is, so that it can be used as a multi-purpose area for the CBD and port events. And we're also reconstructing the Inner Harbor Plaza right there along where all the fishermen's boats are to help restore and improve access to the waterfront. And all of these improvements really help achieve the community's goals of making the Wharf a favorite destination for locals and tourists, just like the CBD had always envisioned. And so of course, with a project this big in such a highly visible location, it's obvious that it takes, a village to pull this off. And we have a lot of departments and partners that have come together, and our overall project construction budget was $14.5 million, which includes engineering staff, construction management, consultants, and of course the hard construction costs. And by leveraging funding from Public Works, the Port, and SFMTA, we were able to secure a grant from the Transportation Authority's Prop K sales tax program. And we also got a huge grant from Caltrans through its new SB1 gas tax program. And of course, we have other important partners in the project, including San Francisco Planning, PUC, the Fisherman's Wharf CBD, who has been an extremely important bridge for us between our construction team and local businesses. And of course, our contractors. Mitchell Engineering is our prime contractor, and their major subcontractors include Bauman Landscape and Barrier Lightworks. So the final thing that I want to point out before passing the presentation on to our design team is the unique complexity of the coordination and jurisdictions that this project has, which may not always be typical of our usual street infrastructure projects across the city. While this is a public works project that hired and is managing its own contractor, the project limits are actually on port property and right on top of the seawall. On this, you can see the jurisdiction line noted there on the left side. So that meant that Public Works had to itself go get a port encroachment permit and is the one responsible to ensure that our contractor abides by all of our regulations. And on a typical project, we simply rely on our contractor to usually pull its own construction permit from Public Works BSM. We also had to get additional permits from BCDC, which is the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, whose main focus is on protecting access to the waterfront during construction. And even though we're on port property, MTA still has jurisdiction over the traffic control. And it was a huge effort to plan the shutdown of the historic F-line streetcar and implement a big bus substitution plan in order to allow us to get our roadway construction work done, which ironically ended up being cut after just a few months anyways, due to the COVID-19 service changes. And we also are working with local businesses, but it's unique on this project because not only do we have private property owners on the south side of the street, we also have port tenants on the north side, which includes the Triangle parking lot operator, Boudin's Bakery, the fishing boats, and the Wharf restaurants, which really adds a unique complexity because those tenants have their own certain contracts and agreements with the port that we had to work around. So, all in all, this is a pretty unique project for our infrastructure division group that's dealing with multiple funding partners and jurisdictions in one of the busiest tourist spots in the city. So it's a really exciting project. And with that, I'm happy to pass things over to Tony Esterbrooks, who is our urban design section manager with our landscape architecture team, to talk more about design.
Thank you, Denny. So I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about the site character. As Denny already talked about, the waterfront in this area and Fisherman's Wharf is a very diverse corridor. There's a lot going on. There's hotels, there's businesses. And one of the things I think we get most excited about as landscape architects is we get to design streets that help bring about street life and other activities to the public right of way. We're very lucky with Jefferson. If you kind of look at the photos here on the right, you have this really vibrant and stimulating street life that already occurs. You have the crab pots, street performers, the water itself, and even the views beyond to the bridge. So I think it's really an exciting corridor. It's a really important connection, I think, between Pier 39 and the aquatic park. So some of the pedestrian improvements that Julie's going to go into here in a minute really helped reinforce the connection, provide a more cohesive waterfront. And some of the big constraints, I think, with this existing stretch of Jefferson is really about vehicles and pedestrian usage. The existing condition was really heavy on vehicular activity. The pedestrians were kind of squeezed through these little corridors here, like you can see by the crab pots. You know, the seating around the iconic Fisherman's Wharf sign was really lacking. This is a big gathering spot. You know, I'm sure it's a big Instagram moment along the street. There's not really a place for anybody to sort of sit and dwell and give that feature the attention it deserves. Improving that connection to the waterfront and the inner harbor for tourists, for the fishermen that come there. And then also just the street performers and getting a little bit more organized about that. I think all this street life is really great, like I mentioned, and we've sort of developed a design that I think helps that all those uses work a lot better. By widening the sidewalks, providing better amenities, providing better lighting, and really reinforcing the sense of place that Jefferson is. You know, I think if we look across the world, waterfront districts are huge economic drivers for cities. And this is certainly one of those. And I think the designs you're going to see really helped reinforce Jefferson as an iconic landmark in San Francisco, not just for tourists, but also for locals, and makes it more inviting, as Randall mentioned. You know, it's quite busy, and it's hard for a local to want to come here and move through and experience those connections along the waterfront. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Julian, who's going to get into the specifics of the street design and some of the urban design elements that we were very fortunate to be able to include. I'd just like to recap and say, you know, we're very lucky that we got to do all these really interesting treatments to make Jefferson Street the place it deserves to be. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Julie. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thank you, Tony. So at the start of phase 2, the design team, we established goals for the project that really echoed the intent of the Fisherman's Wharf Public Realm Plan that was mentioned earlier. So as the only pedestrian connection that runs the whole length of Fisherman's Wharf, it was really important to make this an improved corridor and provide a sense of place and to prioritize pedestrian safety and the pedestrian experience. We also knew the importance of pedestrian safety, as Jefferson Street had been identified as a high injury network street based on the city's Vision Zero plan. And we also wanted to create a safe and a well-lit corridor for nighttime activities and identify opportunities for planting and extend those improvements from phase 1. So phase 1, as mentioned, it was completed in 2013. And one of the big moves from phase 1 was changing Jefferson Street from a one-way to a two-way street. And this created a slower street, which allowed for a safer pedestrian experience. The sidewalks were widened and amenities were added, such as ped lights, bicycle racks, and precast walls. One of the challenges with phase 1 was that a lot of these older buildings and restaurants, as you see in these photos, their finished floor elevations were higher than the existing sidewalk around it. So this provided an opportunity to have some outdoor dining spaces, outdoor terraces that were bordered by these nice precast concrete walls. And the roadway was also designed to have a bold striping pattern that is aesthetically classical and timeless style, and functionally it actually encourages vehicles to slow down. I really like these photos because it really shows the success from phase 1. You can see that the street is highly activated. There's so many people walking and using this space. And economically, phase 1 did bring some revenue increases among the local merchants as well. So I'm going to go into the site plan in more detail. So like phase 1, phase 2 also had the same issues, including those narrow sidewalks, a lack of a strong identity, and public open spaces. So phase 2 incorporated some of the same improvements, including we wanted to continue that bold roadway striping pattern. We included precast concrete walls, widened the sidewalks, and had some special paving in some areas, and added pedestrian lighting as well. And all of these design elements really come together to make this an even greater destination for both tourists and locals alike. And it also reinforces that sense of place, providing a unique pedestrian experience. And the inner harbor, as you see here, is especially important. It's the only part of Jefferson Street that provides direct access to the water for the public, and I'll talk more about the inner harbor in a later slide. The second block of this project, from Taylor to Mason, this is really about Taylor Street Plaza, also known as the heart of Fisherman's Wharf. Due to its centralized location, it's home to the iconic Fisherman's Wharf sign that we are all familiar with, as well as adjacent to the Boudin Bakery, known for its famous sourdough and clam chowder. And this plaza space was actually an underutilized and a rundown parking lot, and it wasn't doing any justice to this place. So we identify this area as an important open space to build a special plaza to support this landmark. And also you can see on the south side of this block, the sidewalk was widened. It was at 15 feet wide and it got widened to 22 feet, which enabled us to add street furnishings, including benches with planters, light poles. Also, we opened up the existing tree wells to support a healthy urban tree canopy. So this last block from Mason to Powell, this is really about the gateway into Jefferson Street, where many visitors are arriving, coming up Powell Street. Visitors are coming from the Embarcadero, from the adjacent Pier 39. And this is where you see that bold pattern, stripe pattern of the roadway. It's starting here, as well as the widened sidewalks and the amenities. On the north side, we relocated the parking lot entrance. There was an existing parking lot there, and we moved that up to the Little Embarcadero onto the north side because we really wanted to continue that pedestrian corridor through this main Jefferson Street. We also provided special treatment to the sidewalk on this the north side here, paving for street performances that were already occurring in this area. As you can see here, this is a visual showing how much the sidewalk widened at the inner harbor, which is quite significant. The pedestrians here, you know, they still get to enjoy the iconic crab pots and the seafood stands, and they now have more space to walk through it and enjoy this unique place. So the inner harbor, like I said, it's very special. It's the only part of the project where people have direct access to the water. Currently, it's serving visitors today with chartered fishing and boating tours, as mentioned earlier. And one of the interesting challenges here was to maintain the existing seawall structure because we could not alter that. And this is where the design team opted to have granite pavers that would be mortared directly onto the existing seawall, which allowed for a thin profile to minimize an elevated sidewalk. Also, the contrasting colors and that same banding pattern was continued from the new roadway paving as well. You can also see here that we replaced, there was an old guardrail that was outdated here, and we replaced that with a new modern guardrail that was inspired by the maritime style guardrails that you see all around the waterfront. This one is specifically inspired by the one at Brannan Street Wharf. And we also added some modern light fixtures with multi-directional lights to light up the sidewalk as well as the boats. So Taylor Street Plaza, again, this is really the heart of Jefferson Street. It's it used to be this underutilized, derelict part of the parking lot that really needed some help. So this special plaza, it's transformed into a flexible space that now supports public gatherings and events and pedestrian usage while still supporting a parking lot. You know, we maintained some parking spaces in this space. Here we also have the special paving treatment that continues that same striping language from the roadway. And we also incorporated this unique precast bench. It's a unique seating feature that allows people to sit on all sides of it, you know, and view the activities going on in the plaza as well as activities going on in the street. We also wanted to frame this plaza. You can see the same precast concrete walls that were used in phase 1, and then as well as framed by trees, which are now palm trees, which is a repeated element that you see from the Embarcadero. Here you can see the completed vision of Taylor Street Plaza with places to sit, places to gather, layered with these modern elements that really reinforce this sense of place. This is truly a special destination within San Francisco, and we look forward to its continued success as an important part of Fisherman's Wharf and as a beloved place in our city. So thank you, and I would now like to pass it on to Ben Volberding with Construction Management.
Thanks, Julie. As Julie mentioned, my name is Ben Volberding. I'm a civil engineer with Public Works, Infrastructure Development and Construction, or Design and Construction, and I serve as the resident engineer construction manager on this project. For my portion of this presentation, I was going to talk about some of the unique construction requirements and scopes of work. I think we've got a good summary from Randall, Denny, Tony, and Julie about special design considerations, and I was going to drill down a little bit on construction. So as has been alluded to in kind of everyone's speeches so far, the 3 blocks that we're working on here has incredibly high density of pedestrians and merchants as well as vehicle usage. And a big requirement of our contract is that we continue that access as unimpeded as possible throughout the entirety of our work. But COVID changed that up a little bit pretty quickly into our project. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of merchants' storefronts shuttered throughout the life of our project, which has had a very small benefit or side effect to us of allowing us to work much more impeded. You can see on this first photo in the top right just how close we are to these merchant storefronts. So, clearly unfortunate for them, but it did definitely expedite our construction when those have been shuttered. Another particular requirement of our project that is a rarity for our work is, as Julie alluded to, that a good portion of our work, especially on the western end of the project, was directly atop the existing seawall, which we obviously need to maintain its integrity. So that kind of dictated a lot of means and methods for our contractor in terms of equipment selection or just general work practices. So they had to kind of put on their kids' gloves and be delicate when working around that seawall. We did have a little issues with damage either caused by our work or pre-existing damages that we found, but we've found that the port has been a really good partner in this project to help us resolve these issues as we discover them. Another special circumstance on this project, as Denny alluded to, is just our proximity to the waterfront and the additional attention and importance of environmental compliance just because of our proximity. So, this photo in the bottom right shows our work going on and directly, but this is at the inner harbor and directly behind it is the water. So, we just have to, ourselves and our contractor had to be kind of extra cognizant of making sure we're containing any debris related to our work and not letting it get into the waterway. So now I want to drill down on a couple unique scope elements related to our work. Again, something that's been kind of hammered on throughout by Landscape in their presentation was this special alternating concrete band roadway profile. And you can see there on the bottom left was the existing roadway. It was just your typical 2 inches of asphalt over a concrete base course, which is much simpler to install, although not nearly as aesthetically pleasing as these alternating bands of concrete. So you can just see in this bottom middle photo here, just how resource and labor intensive the construction of these alternating bands is. So they're also epoxy, reinforced with epoxy coated steel. So you've got these bars that run longitudinally and latitudinally along the roadway, and then you have to have your bands formed with penetrations to allow those the reinforcement to be continuous throughout. Additionally, just because you've got the contrasting concrete colors, you obviously have multiple pours where you've got form stripping in between. So again, just something that differentiates this project and makes it a really special one to be involved with. And just as a metric, we've got about 23,000 square feet of this reinforced roadway just in these 3 blocks. Another interesting element that's pretty unique to the projects that at least that IDC usually works in is there's just a lot of these precast elements, as well as the metal guardrail over at the Inner Harbor. So for the precast, we've got, as Julie was mentioning, we've got benches, walls, curbs, above ground pole foundations, about 17 individual pieces of precast totaling over $500,000 worth of contract work. And the guardrail, this again is at the Inner Harbor. We've got about 260 linear feet of this guardrail to install. Unfortunately, these procurement of both of these elements has been delayed largely because of COVID and shutdowns that have happened. But as you can see in the photo on the bottom left there, we're now getting these elements delivered to the job site and are excited to be installing them shortly. So I wanted to talk about kind of one of the interesting differing site conditions that we've encountered, and there have been several of them. But this right here at the plaza that we keep talking about is right under that cone. When our contractor came and did the demolition of the existing surface there at the plaza, they found this riser that had been covered with concrete, and when they went to go investigate it, it started leaking oil. So we got a specialist contractor in to take a look and survey what was there. And in that process of investigating that location, we found out that it actually used to be a gas station, a Chevron station. So after investigation, it was determined that it wasn't a gas tank like we had originally feared, but it was an abandoned hydraulic cylinder, presumably from a vehicle lift that was at the shop there. And unfortunately, the top elevation of that cylinder was about a foot above the finished grade of our concrete, so we needed to remove it. And so that unfortunately slowed our work at the plaza. But the good news is that removal work of that cylinder was completed this week, so we're now ready to roll on the plaza. And here is just a photo of the plaza, and then you can see, you know, the orientation's a little bit different, but you see the sign there, and then you see on the right side that Chevron Standard Oil sign, just to give context of what that area used to be. That covers my portion of the presentation. I'll turn it back to Denny for some closing comments.
Thanks, Ben. And thank you to all of our presenters who provided their unique perspectives on this project. It's been a really long road for this project. We started planning for phase 2 around 2017 and completed detailed design in early 2019. And then finally started construction in October 2019. And over the past year, we made tremendous construction progress, and we're very close to the end. We anticipate wrapping up construction soon here, just in early February, and we'll have a ribbon cutting event shortly afterwards. So look out for more information on that event and join us as we celebrate. After the project is complete, I'm sure the CBD will be collecting post-construction pedestrian counts and business revenue numbers. So it'll be really exciting to see the real tangible impacts that our project will make for the Fisherman's Wharf community. And I know I can speak for the whole team when I say that we are very fortunate, lucky, and thankful to have the opportunity to design and construct this once in a generation project in such an important and historic area like Fisherman's Wharf. So with that, we thank you all for taking the time this afternoon to learn more about our project, and I will pass it over to Ben for Q&A.
Thank you, Denny, and thank you to all of our presenters for giving us the rundown on the Jefferson Streetscape project. My name is Ben Peterson. I'm on the Public Works Communications team, and I'm going to be facilitating the question and answer portion of today's webinar. If you haven't done so already and you have a question, feel free to submit it at the bottom just by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or you can send it in through the chat. Our first question is, I guess it's probably best for Ben Volberding. Matt Jasmine asks, how did the contractor pour the alternating band of concrete? Did they go all the way down with one color and then start from the beginning again using the other color, or what was that process like?
Yeah, Ben, thanks. It's a good question, and I think you kind of got to it in your theorizing about it. But so basically, they would install the formwork for a certain section of roadway, call it a couple hundred feet, and that formwork looked just like what I had in my photo. And then what they do is they come and pour one of the colors, so they would pour every other kind of panel. And then they allow that to cure for a little bit, and then they'll come and strip out all of the formwork, which would just leave those separate panels, and then they come back and do the infill with the contrasting color to get your complete roadway.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Matt, for submitting that question as well. This next question, I guess it could be open to any of the panelists. Nicholas Crawford asks, some of the clunky or quirky elements are part of the charm of Fisherman's Wharf. How did you try to retain the essence or like the spirit of Fisherman's Wharf and make sure that wasn't lost in the new design?
I'll chime in and answer that. I think the waterfront along San Francisco has done a really good job of not trying to falsify what it isn't, meaning, you could take the Disneyland approach and do these sort of faux treatments that aren't authentic. I think they've done a really good job incorporating with sort of this industrial waterfront look, whether it's through the look of the precast concrete walls or the guardrails that don't compete with what is already there, and whether that's Pier 39 or the street or whatever it is. So I think it's a little bit of an elegant approach. It's a little bit understated, except for maybe the banding of the roadway, which is a really timeless, I think, urban design approach that you see a lot of the time. And we're still allowing for a lot of that quirk to happen, whether that's the street performers or the crab pots or the boats that are out there, the A-frame signage, the people selling the Fisherman's Wharf fleece, which is probably iconic at this point. So I don't think we've taken away from the life of the street through the design. We've really worked to accommodate the things that were already happening out there that were really great, and designed it in a way that we don't compete with the success that already exists out there.
Yeah, I can kind of speak to that a little bit too.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony, and you're spot on. The street itself and the design itself is kind of a foundation. It runs underneath the wharf, so to speak, underneath people's feet. The quirkiness of the wharf will always be there. It's just that kind of place. So the seagulls are still going to come. The boats are still going to go in and out. So it's the design team did a fantastic job of pulling together a cohesive design in an incohesive area without it looking like it was manufactured. So hats off to the team for doing that. And it's looking really good and still quirky.
Great. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely important to keep that essence of Fisherman's Wharf, because like you said, Randall, it did start out as, and it still is, a commercial fishing area, and that's kind of how it got its start. Our next question, I guess, it could either be for Randall or potentially Julie as well. So an anonymous attendee is asking, will the Taylor Street Plaza have programmed events like holiday events or farmers markets? And how was that, or if that's the case, how was that incorporated into the new design?
So I guess Julianne will go into the actual design of it. The intended use, as I understand it, is what's called a flex space. And what that means is it can be parking when it needs to be parking. It can be an open plaza when it needs to be an open plaza, and it can be activated. So those activations are going to fall on the CBD and surrounding neighborhoods to put together, so we can put some programming in there. Prior to this, we would have to pull, I'm sure we'll have to pull some sort of permit, but we had to jump through all these hoops in order to get some space to have an activation. Now we have a dedicated space for activation. So it's going to allow us to program it. So yes, there will be programming. What that looks like going forward, it could be a market, could be any number of things.
And I also just wanted to add that the plaza is a pretty sizable space. It's about 7,000 square feet. And even though we had to maintain some of those parking spaces, even when there are cars parked in that space, there is still a lot of area for events to happen.
Great, thank you. It seems like it's definitely a place that can be used for a bunch of different potential events or one-off things as well. So our next question is, prior to the pandemic, what impact did phase 1 of this project have on Fisherman's Wharf? Was there any tangible increase in visitors or revenues that came about due to these improvements? I think we touched on this a little bit, but if I think Denny or maybe Randall could go into a little bit more depth about how phase 1 changed that stretch of Fisherman's Wharf.
Yeah, I think maybe Randall might have more information, but I do have some data that we received through our planning department and the CBD and our Office of Economic Development. And so when the phase 1 project was complete, some of the information and feedback that we received is that businesses on that stretch, they increased gross sales anywhere from 10 to 21% in the months right after the construction was completed and opened back up. Some other data that we have is that some of the business owners and the property owners in the vicinity have spent millions of dollars in their own funding to start redeveloping their properties and reinvesting in their businesses to bring them up to a higher standard to kind of match the new streetscape that's came out of phase 1. And pedestrian counts, I think, have really increased as well. And there's one stat that we have from one of the fishermen's boats there saying their business has increased 20% of all the new tours and pedestrian traffic in the area. So I think phase 1 made a really good impact, and I'm more hopeful that phase 2 will make an even greater impact as we recover from this pandemic.
So with regard to phase 1, unfortunately, I was not the AD here during that period of time. And the pedestrian counters were not installed until 2014. So do we have hard data? No, but I will say this, that resounding applause from the business owners in phase 1, with a couple of exceptions. Let's face it, you can't make everybody happy all the time, no matter what you do, even though it's my job. But it's the overall impact on the street itself. It has been tremendously positive, and visually speaking, people like walking on it. They like walking on just the open space of the concrete bands in the middle of the street. We shut down the street on a number of occasions, and I think that's kind of the future of urban space. Whether COVID or no COVID, people like space. And now we have this 5-block area where the whole thing looks like a plaza itself. So it's I anticipate this is going to accelerate the recovery post-COVID. And our plan at the CBD is to really push that and use the street and use the wider sidewalks to really promote social distancing and safe shopping, and, and safe outdoor dining. So I think the timing of this project couldn't have been better in that it will be a catalyst for greater economic recovery for the area.
Great, thank you. I think those numbers are super impressive, and I agree that it seems like it'll be a positive impact on phase 2 of the project as well. We have time for a few more questions. The next one is, I guess it might be best for maybe Ben. Was night work ever necessary to work around the schedule of all the different businesses and organizations that are along Jefferson Street?
Yeah, so we didn't do any night work on this particular project. There was a little bit of a discussion about it on the easternmost block where we had some water main replacement work. When PUC comes in to do those connections on new water mains, they often like to do it at night. But we actually have there's a hotel on that third block, and when the connections were done, we were still living pre-pandemic then, so people were in the hotel, and out of the sensitivities for them, we opted to do it during the day. But again, I think because of the pandemic kind of making things easier construction wise with the storefronts, we didn't really have any incentive since March to pursue night work.
That totally makes sense. If I was staying in a hotel, the last thing I would want is construction going on in the middle of the night.
That's right.
Thank you. I guess this is our last question, and I think it might be best for Denny. How did the design team manage the existing F-line trackway and the associated cobble paving? I guess generally, how did the Muni F-line kind of factor into how the project was planned and the construction was planned?
So originally, when the project was first in design, the streetcar was planned to continue during construction. So that would have been a pretty challenging effort for our team, and luckily we were able to negotiate with the MTA to stop the train, the streetcar during construction, which gave us the opportunity to make some improvements around the trackway as part of our design. And we didn't actually replace any of the track itself or any of the cobbles within the trackway, but we did have an opportunity to replace some of the cobblestones areas around the trackway that used to be roadway. And we were able to extend our sidewalk into those spaces as part of our sidewalk widening. And so some of the areas on the roadway where the cobbles used to be will now be sidewalk, or we replaced it with special granite pavers that our design team put together to kind of keep that unique look of the trackway. So overall, it's challenging that the trackway is there, but I think the team did a great job of kind of working around it and designing it into the project.
Great, thank you, Denny. Again, lots of moving parts, lots of different things to keep in mind in this project. So yeah, it makes sense that there's a lot to keep in mind there. That seems like that is all the questions that we have for our panelists. Thank you all again for your presentations and your thoughtful answers to all these questions. And I'm going to pass it back to Coma to give our final remarks.
Great. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to all of our presenters today. And thank you for joining us. We had about 110 attendees joining us today. So it's amazing. Thank you for taking time out of your day to learn more about the Jefferson Streetscape project. I want to remind you that our next webinar, or Snapshots Live series, will be December 17th, and will focus on emergency response. So be on the lookout for more information about that soon. With that, we just want to wrap it up. We thank you again for joining us, and we hope you learned a little something new about the Jefferson Streetscape project. Thank you all.